Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Pan-IIT Global E-Conclave on Nation Rebuilding. To open the conclave, please welcome Hari Padmanabhan, Chairman Pan-IIT Alumni Reach for India. Hari is a parallel entrepreneur, mentor, and early-stage investor. He is co-founder and chairman Pan-IIT Reach for India Foundation, set up with like-minded alumni in 2009 to champion nation-building initiatives across the country.
Good evening to all of you joining from India, and good day to others joining from different time zones to this Pan-IIT Alumni Global E-Conclave on Nation Rebuilding. It's really wonderful for me to have you all here today, and it is really your conclave. It is your support and participation over the next 3 weekends that will determine the success and effectiveness of this conclave we have put together in a rather short period, only possible under the current circumstances. I also trust that this inspires many, or at least some of you, to make a career, particularly the younger alumni, to make a career in doing good while you do well. Pan-IIT Alumni Reach for India Foundation and its joint venture with the government of Jharkhand called Praja, over the last 10 years, has created a model that is one of collaboration across multiple sectors. This impacts the weakest section of society by empowering underprivileged youth not just with the skills needed to make a career, but also the assured jobs that from in established organizations that can really provide them a long-term employment. This while providing the means as well through a skill loan that ensures that their economic situation is not a barrier to benefiting from this unique program. The government, on the other hand, and business and industry as well, are also key stakeholders in this structure. The government, with equity in the private-public partnership, extends not only infrastructure and financial support, but also brings board-level governance and opens up new avenues for us. We will talk more about this in the next session. One of the recent avenues that they opened up for us was by asking us to set up COVID testing labs in Jharkhand. And I'm very happy to announce that the first one has gone live just about last week, and many are under a very advanced stage of completion. All our infrastructure, whatever we created for any of our training institutes or the COVID labs, are world-class. And we have closely worked with the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India in putting this COVID testing lab together. The corporate sector, or Bazaar, not only provides long-term employment to our trainees, but also bridges the viability gap through funding. National institutions such as NABARD and NSDC, the National Skill Development Corporation, are also part of the entire ecosystem in terms of providing either financial support on a one-time basis initially or an ongoing basis by funding our skill loans. The foundation is now fully geared to scale this model across the country and is engaged with many states such as Odisha, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, and Chhattisgarh. Hence, the coming together of Samaj, Sarkar, Bazaar in a collaborative partnership has been the key to our success. And the idea of this conclave was conceived on the basis of sharing this experience of bringing together these three supposedly diverse sectors of the economy, and how the coming together has provided a scalable model in the social sector, impacting the weakest section of society. So this conclave over the next 3 weekends aims to bring together leaders across multiple sectors of the economy, across skills and livelihood, agriculture, industry, education, healthcare, as well as being focused on skills, MSME, startups, and very significantly, gender empowerment. We sincerely trust that the sharing of our experience in multiple sectors of collaboration and the thought leadership that comes from the distinguished speakers across these sectors will enable the creation of a comprehensive framework that will be a systemic response to nation rebuilding that the country is engaged in the aftermath of the pandemic we currently experience. Considering that the challenge today is not from an external source or the more familiar historical sources of such situations, but from a rather mysterious virus, I think it's most appropriate that we have the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India, Dr. Vijay, who will inaugurate the session as we go forward to the next one. And the host of the session, I'm a great pleasure introducing Professor Satish Agnihotri. Professor Satish Agnihotri heads the Center for Technology Advancement in Rural Areas, Chithara, in IIT Bombay. He's a IIT alum with an MTech from IIT Bombay and is an IAS officer who retired as cabinet secretary and been a secretary in multiple ministries such as defense acquisition, energy, and also been DG of shipping. He has a master's in rural development and a PhD in gender from Norwich in the UK. and has been cited. His work has been cited by very eminent personalities such as Amartya Sen, Ashish Bose, and Barbara Harris. Over to you, Professor Agnihotri.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that rather generous introduction. I think one of the reasons of me being the host here is probably being from the IIT system. IIT Mumbai happens to be my alma mater. And after my retirement as secretary coordination in the cabinet secretariat, I wasn't quite the cabinet secretary, but I was in the cabinet secretariat. I came back to my alma mater, and I have been teaching here since. I think it's my great pleasure to have with us Professor Vijay Raghavan, the PSA, the Principal Scientific Advisor. He is also from IIT system, knows the system quite well and doesn't need any introduction. We have had opportunities to interact in the past. Not just he's from the IIT system, he was also Secretary Biotechnology. He also held charge of Secretary Science and Technology Department. This becomes important because right now he's in a position where it's like, the head of the tetrahedron. So he's in a position to coordinate areas which he erstwhile had administered, interacted, and knows them fairly deeply. So in a way, he's in a very suitable position to bring synergy into this whole exercise. And he will enlighten us. PSA's office has taken a number of initiatives, and that's just as well because today we are looking at the need for bringing inputs from science and technology for this crisis that one is facing. I mean, Hari used the term post-pandemic. That post part has not firmly come in. We are into it, and of course we'll ride it over. But currently the situation looks like it's not a 2020 match. It's not even a one-day cricket. Well, I would even say it's not even a test match, but we are in for a test series. And during such time, it's a very comforting thought that we have among the thought leaders, someone like Professor Vijay Raghavan, the PSA to the Government of India. And for Pan-IITians, it also means we can bounce our ideas off him, we can nudge him, we can bother him, we can exasperate him, and which being from the IIT system, he very happily accepts and he picks up. I mean, he has that what is called, if you permit me, Professor Vijay Raghavan, he has that Nir Kshir Vivek. So he listens to our chaff also, but he also picks up the grains and then takes them forward. So I think without much ado, I will welcome Professor Vijay Raghavan and first ask him, how does he see this this very onerous responsibility of infusing, I think, inputs from science and technology, both in the current crisis and the aftermath that we are going to handle, as I said, in a test series. So, so Vijay Raghavan.
Yeah, thank you very much, Satish, and thank you very much, Hari, for organizing this and having me here. It's a pleasure to be amongst fellow alumni. My years at Kanpur are memorable, and the friendships we made there have stayed a lifetime, and also the friendships amongst all the other colleagues here. Now, very interestingly, Satish asked, how does one get science and technology into various aspects of our life and decision making? But the fact is that over 4 industrial revolutions, science has permeated every part of our lives and technology. But the problem is that that has not been matched by an understanding of science and technology. Indeed, the understanding of science has, perhaps amongst people in general, has become more distant, and technology has become even more incomprehensible. When people like me were growing up, if you opened up a watch or a car, you could in some ways figure out what was going on. You could actually open up, break up the components, compare them to what you saw in books or what someone told you, and understand the functioning of the most complex technological offerings. Today, if you open up the or electronic watch, you know, lay people will have no idea what is inside. So yet they use that all the times. So people will use a iPhone, take an Airbus, and go to a protest against the evils of technology. And this distancing of people from all components is a very real. That distancing is even more enhanced by the use of big data and artificial intelligence. And therefore, we have a big challenge now to communicate better science and technology to everyone if they have to be empowered. That is a big challenge, and that's feasible. And if we have time, we'll come to that a little later.
Yeah, I think somewhere probably you are saying that the demystification of the new or the advanced science and technology is perhaps again needed. But we will touch upon it if we have the time. But I think to begin with, let us see this current scenario where I think not just your office, but the scientific departments in the government of India and the educational institutes of higher learning in general, have to grapple with this issue of how to cope with the mysterious virus, as Hari called it, and how do we bring that relief, if I may say, in some senses, to the population in the immediate future, while we may be talking of vaccine, etc., that may be a much distant issue. So even something as mundane as low-cost sanitizer, how do you handle situations where soap may be available, water may not be adequately available, masks, the PPE, I mean, that is on the equipment side, and bringing back on the front burner the preventive measures, particularly in health and sanitation. How does your office see that? Because I think that role of coordination, I think that is very important. I mean, I see three silos. One is the overarching coordination part of it. Other is the health and sanitation side of it. And the third, which we will talk about later, will be the economy side of it. But if you could tell our audience about the initiatives that are already being taken, and there's an impressive list of initiatives that have been taken by your office and by the other scientific departments.
Hello. Yes. Thank you. That is very important, Satish. You are pointing out that, given the complexities of the virus, the importance of coordination and the effectiveness of various measures being taken. And indeed, that's most important. This was highlighted actually some years ago when the Prime Minister was addressing entering officers to the civil service and said that supposing the goal of the government is to plant a sapling, and there's a department of digging a hole, there's a department of putting the sapling in the hole, and a department of filling the hole again with dirt. If these three departments do their work, someone digs a hole, the planting is somewhere else, and the filling of a hole is somewhere else. Every department may have done its full job, but you haven't accomplished the outcome. Therefore, coordination is very, very important. And this coordination is even more important in complex matters which involves multiple specialities of science and technology, and even further important at a time like this. So this is one aspect to keep in mind. Synergy is important, and there are very strong coordination mechanisms going on now which interestingly, because there's a crisis, people have risen to the occasion and are coordinating much, much better than ever before. So that's on the very strong and positive side. Now, about the virus itself, we must remember that while this particular pandemic touches our lives, there have been no shortage of pandemics earlier. There's been the 1918 flu pandemic before. There's been another pandemic, the plague, the Great Plague earlier in the 19th century. Then there has been the Ebola epidemic, which nearly became a pandemic. And the influenza pandemic goes on every year. So this kind of a pandemic, a zoonotic jump, a spillover from bats to humans, has been studied really well. It was studied most recently in the SARS coronavirus 1 a few years ago, almost I think 8-9 years ago. And such spillovers account for a very large, about 60% of human disease. So this is not new. This has been, warned and talked about by several people over the last decades or two. And, I'm a member of a body called a Global Preparedness Monitoring Board. We warned about a respiratory pathogen in 2019. So these warnings are there. But fundamentally, in an economy-driven world where profits and bottom lines matter, there is a tendency not to invest in a seat belt. The argument is that, well, I'm driving perfectly fine without a seat belt. Why do I need it? And the seat belt in this case is monitoring virus spread in virology, research in ecology, research in environmental sciences, public health, and so on. Now this is a wake-up call for us to coordinate that, bring that seatbelt on board. But that can happen only if you factor in the economic cost of what you're buying now. Must be that factor for investment in the future must be factored into the cost of what you're making now. We need to pay for the seatbelt and we need to raise resources.
Right. I think it's very important that you brought in this analogy of a seat belt. Quite often we put preventive on the back burner, but very interestingly, I suppose your initial remarks are already made our audience curious, and we have Santosh. I think he wants to come in with a question. So do we have him as a phone in, or would he like to come through the chat? And I think do let me know when Santosh is ready with his question. But Professor Vijayaraghavan, I also wanted to ask this particular issue, that what we are now seeing is what I can describe as shrinking physical and expanding digital. And I think that is where the issue of new knowledge, new technologies, and coordination comes in very much. Because in the aftermath of this pandemic, you would notice that people would have brought down their physical requirements to a very manageable extent, either out of a sense of precaution or even on account of the perceived economic constraints. But there will be a layer of digital which will then permeate all our lives. And in the field of education, it will be in the field of communication, it will be in the field of entertainment. So how do we then get our large populace to cope with this, and particularly given your familiarity with the education world, how do you see this happening, particularly in the school system and then also in the college and higher learning system? So let's begin with the education, because I think that's what many of our listeners will be curious about.
Well, I think this point about education is a very important one. And the principal challenge is that the structure of people getting jobs had already changed dramatically before the pandemic. Yeah. The kinds of skilling which were required had changed dramatically. And it has changed even more for the reasons we have seen after the pandemic. Fundamentally, they go to three components. Before the pandemic, what was happening was, in general, jobs which involved low skills, middle level skills, or even high skills were steadily going back to sites closer to where customers were. This is because of what is called Industry 4.0. Manufacturing could be located where markets were there rather than at remote places because of labor arbitrage. So labor arbitrage was going to be destroyed, and therefore reskilling was needed. The second revolution which was taking place, and this was a consequence of the first, was that the products which were sold to markets, such as in India, were largely a combination of cyber and physical markets. In other words, not necessarily by direct link. You're told where it's available, you're told where it's cheap by other big companies. So, in other words, your decision making capacity has also been farmed off to someone else. These two situations pose an enormous challenge to our education. We need to now reformat our education so that kids everywhere in the country, whether they are in rural areas or urban areas, have an education. And this is not easy. This is not easy because it is not just about technology getting live streaming there, but it's about content and delivery of content. And the internet and other forms of content reach only a very small, other forms of delivery systems reach only a very small number of people. So we need to bring in television in a big way, but we also need to bring content in multiple languages. And that content will include now digital tools, learning coding, so that you are also your own, ruler in terms of decision making. And these kinds of digital dependent decision making are not left to others. This will, I think, result in a resurgence of both digital and physical kind of jobs which are tailored to our context, and more on that later.
Yeah, great. You brought this up, issue of television also. I would say one community radio could be a useful thing, particularly when we will be talking about flipped class systems. But I think we have Santosh ready. So can Santosh be taken, brought live? Hi, Santosh. Please ask your question.
Yes, sir. A very good evening. Amol, thanks a lot. So yeah, my question is, what are the strategies that India is taking regarding towards this is different compared to the rest of the countries in the world?
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, you are asking what is it that we are doing differently rather than doing more of the same. So I think Professor Vijay, that's squarely in your domain.
I didn't hear the question fully, but I presume it's about what we're doing differently in terms of the pandemic. So I'll answer that. That is the case. Okay, good. Now, as the disease started spreading, we had very little knowledge on what to do. And we had to guess in terms of our understanding of the fundamental biology of the virus and how we had dealt with other pandemics. So those who are involved in decision making in the countries which were hit first, the Wuhan province of China, the rest of China, Korea, Italy, Spain, these people had a really tough time in deciding what was most effective. China took a stand which was extraordinarily considered extraordinarily infeasible in other locations. They completely locked off Wuhan from the rest of the country, and that resulted in really crushing the spread of the pandemic to the rest of China. However, they were late in stopping people from flying out of Wuhan to all parts of the world, and that resulted in the spread all over the world. India was one of the earliest to lock down on international travelers coming in. That was very good, and India's monitoring was very good. So India did that, something which was done well and special. Later on, India has had an enormous challenge because India's population is sort of a combination of all of Europe, Argentina, all of America. This is a huge population, and its diversity is just incredible. And therefore, to talk about Indian response and Indian metrics without breaking it up into components will not be correct. Now, India did well in the lockdown period by building up capacity, and that was very good. It's pretty incredible to see how our healthcare capacity was built up during the lockdown. Now, and another thing which India did, which was very good, which was unlike other countries, India advocated the use of masks and distancing much more robustly than many other countries. The result of this post-lockdown, what we are seeing now, is interesting. We are seeing, spikes in many major cities. These will spread to rural areas and to smaller towns, and there will be big challenges. But what is unusual about India, which needs investigation, is our death rate, our case fatality rate is very low. Now, this, I think, is a combination of two things. One, our much younger demography, but also a combination of our ability to learn on the job, which is a very good capability of Indian medics and Indian medical researchers, so that the treatment of people with extreme morbidities is very good. So the death rate is much lower than expected elsewhere. So I think India has done, in very difficult situations, a very creditable job.
Santosh, I suppose that does address your question. I hope you are satisfied with this. I would also request other audience to come in, particularly our younger friends who are listening to this. But I think I will take Professor Vijay Raghavan to a slightly different track. I mean, he mentioned about the e-marketing part of it. I'm taking you to the economy, because that's another issue of great concern, particularly to a lot of younger people. And with apologies to the original Shire, I would say, कोरोना से आगे जहां और भी हैं, अभी इकोनॉमी के इम्तिहान और भी हैं, and it is the economy का इम्तिहान which is something where we need to come out with flying colors. So when you talked about this whole issue of e-marketing, I mean, it seems a little contradictory, but can one bring Gandhi in and say that this whole idea of mass production versus production by masses? So can we now probably look at this production by masses at different nodes with good quality control and quality assurance courtesy technology, and then going for a digital marketing, which probably may be a very efficient way of benefiting the primary producer on one hand and the consumer on the other hand? So, I mean, it's a slightly futuristic thought, but I would love to have your reaction on this.
There are two kinds of answers to this. And one I would call the 19th and 20th century answer. This involved the broad prevalence of unskilled labor to do quality work. In other words, people were involved in the production of wealth, but did not necessarily understand the science and engineering beyond their production. And this has been true for millennia. Whenever people made tools, they don't necessarily, tens of thousands of years ago, didn't necessarily have to know the physics or the engineering beyond those tools. But today's science and technology is very different. Let me give you two examples. One, people of my age group, Hari and others, when we were growing up, when cricket matches were going on, everyone used to walk around with a transistor radio held towards the ear. This little transistor radio, if you opened it up, you would find a printed circuit board over there, in which there were transistors, capacitors, resistors, and so on. These were typically assembled in different villages in India, and women used to put in resistors, and next village used to put in capacitors, another village used to solder everything, and these boards were assembled and done. So this was high tech of that time, assembled by people who did not understand the electronics behind it. Now that in some ways is still feasible now, is redoable.
I think we have lost Professor Vijay Raghavan for a while.
I'll come back.
Yeah. Okay, great.
But
Yeah.
where did you lose me? Do you remember?
Yeah. We just lost you when you said that this is still feasible today, but and then
Okay. So it's feasible today to bring back, but this requires a different kind of skilling. The availability of power,
Yeah.
renewable energy, for example, in every place is one tool. The other is the power transistor revolution has allowed machines to be accessible with low voltage DC.
Absolutely.
These two means that new kinds of manufacturing can be done locally, and that means all you need is high quality roads and infrastructure to deliver these products. But this requires extraordinary training and skilling. This is no longer merely putting in parts and assembling it. This requires a lot higher level of understanding. So education there is very, very important. The next component is internet connectivity. As that spreads, you have the ability to design, whether it is your textile or your paintings or electronics. Local design can be done and copyrighted or patented and exported on the internet to multiple other locations, thereby earning income. So design of machinery, design of every component is one way to do it.
Yeah, but Professor Vijay Raghavan, I think this is one thing which a lot of people are saying, and one of our audience, George Varghese, is asking this question, that manufacturing is the backbone of the economy, however much digital sets its foot in. And in fact, one of the poets, I remember, he said, "आप जितना भी digital कर ले, लेकिन रोटी Google से download नहीं होती, वो तो बनानी पड़ती है." So it's in the same spirit. But then how do you see this happening in the new normal? And that's exactly where I was bringing this whole issue of a production by masses with QC/QA, and then the marketing or aggregation or movements could be digitally handled. Will that be a feasible way? Because given the IT firepower that we have today in India, that seems to be feasible. So how would you react to George Varghese's question?
I completely agree that not all manufacturing can be local, but the tools of manufacturing are changing. That a substantial part of manufacturing can be local, and designs can be imported or exported, so that computer-aided design linked with manufacturing instruments allow local manufacturing of components and distribution. This is one way, one component. I'm not sure it'll be all pervasive, and I'm not sure it'll be all pervasive very soon, but that is one kind of economy which is there. I was visiting Bharat Forge a year ago, and I saw their jet engine design department. And they were designing high-end jet engines, small jet engines, and they were designing those and manufacturing them by subtractive manufacturing. The design was all precisely done, every component of the material was known, and they manufactured an engine. And then what did they do? They exported hundreds of engines to Germany. How did they export it? Not one engine left Pune. They exported every detail of the design, including how every machine was to be computer controlled and functioned, to their German collaborators, who then manufactured it there and did, instead of manufacturing 5, manufactured 500. So in other words, the design is going to be, whether it's semiconductor design or jet engine design or textile design, design is going to be at a premium. You need to have the ability to manufacture some extent locally, but instrumentation distributed can allow scaling up of manufacturing. And the greatest profit and the greatest value will come from thought. And therefore, our education should be focused on thought, logical thinking, and training to excel in design.
I think that's very well put, because it essentially says that, for the sake of manufacturing, you don't have to do either or between the manufacturing and the digital. In fact, the trick is to bring the Shastri and the Mistri together. And in some sense, when Hari was referring to the Jharkhand initiative of Pan-IIT, that's something which they are trying to do, which the next session will take up. But I think George's question related to manufacturing has triggered a curiosity from some of the startups, and we have Kaushik Chakravarti. He's asking us, how do you see the startups working in the healthcare domain performing post-COVID? And I think this is very important, and it also links up with some of the initiatives from your office and the Department of Science and Technology. So what would be your message for the young startups, particularly in the health sector? And I would add to Kaushik's question about the preventive aspects of the healthcare. Where is the role or scope for the startups there?
Okay, now this is a very exciting and important question. And this, one needs to learn from what we have been doing recently in some sectors extraordinarily successfully, and how potentially that can be scaled up to the healthcare sector. Now look at the financial sector. India's finance stack, the IT stack, the universal payments system, riding on that, several payment platforms have come, and the Reserve Bank, the Finance Ministry, and these platforms have worked extraordinarily well. In a similar manner, we need to make sure that our health stack also functions so that health can be delivered to all. So we need a government-supported, regulated, quality backbone on which multiple players of different kinds, multiple kinds of health systems, from Ayurveda to allopathy and others can come in. But, you have different ways of delivering health services, both preventive, maternal and child care, to each and every person. This person has a health ID so that no matter whether you're rich or poor, with that ID, your health records can come with your privacy protected, up to you. Whether you're rich or poor or wherever you go, you have access to your information, and this needs to be done. And this is amazingly, eminently doable today by the Indian IT industry. In a similar way, what you can do for health, you can do for agriculture, you can do for livestock. And this is what we must do with passion, because this allows us to integrate government programs which are huge, which have a lot of infrastructure in it, with private programs which are nimble, but must also have a regulatory system so that the private program and the government program can partner for public good.
Going forward and still staying on Kaushik's question, do you see a huge role for startups in the field of telemedicine? Because I think today, courtesy the current crisis, a lot of medical professionals and even the patients have switched over to the equivalent of a majburi ka telemedicine. But can that majburi ka telemedicine be converted into adat ka telemedicine? That becomes the new norm. Do you see a role of startup, and is your office or one of the scientific departments pushing it in a way, or you see any role of any of the IITs in it, or Pan-IIT in it?
All of the above. Let me come to that for a little later after I tell you. Chandra from Tata Sons has written a book called The Digital Nation, about bridging the digital with these kinds of services. And reading that book, you'll get a set of examples which are extraordinary about how being digital doesn't have to be distant from people, because you have people who are bridges from the digital to the real world. And this can be done for telemedicine, and there's an enormous room for startups for medicine delivery and for all sorts of other human related, societal related services today. So this is going to happen increasingly, and this COVID pandemic is a wake-up call to do that. Before this, we were in a mood that every time we wanted to do something on telemedicine or on e-methods of delivery, we were warned about, data storage and how it could be misused and so on and so forth. And those parameters have been addressed really well now, and they have been addressed well in the financial sector, and they need to be ported over here. But remember that the real world as it stands today is even more fraught with all these kinds of problems in terms of access by the poorest to medical care. And therefore, we must have telemedicine, but do it in a manner where this digital is there so that those without access to the tele resources can still have care. And that is eminently feasible today. And I won't spend too much more time on it, but I should say today in radiology, for example, there are private hospitals in India who are catering to radiology analysis in Indonesia and Malaysia on an enormous scale. Now, this is being catered to in the poorest areas in Indonesia. And therefore, our hospitals already have experience because of the legal system allowing them to do that. If we open up our internal structures, which we are doing now, I think high-end healthcare and preventive care will reach many parts of India. And I'm sure this will happen soon.
I think, Kaushik, you have a twin task. Professor Vijayaraghavan, going back to his IIT days, has given you a reading assignment. And in his current role as a PSA, he has given you an aspiration to look to. So I'm sure you will be able to do justice with both. But we also have a question from Loirego. He says, how will pandemic preparedness be expanded and institutionalized in India, drawing upon our experience of COVID-19? I think that's important issue, because we can't treat it as a one-off or ye chala gaya to chutkare ki saas chhod diya and go back to business as usual. But so how do you visualize this getting institutionalized? And I think there the role of technology or the role of scientific departments becomes very, very crucial. So would you like to respond to this question?
Well, the answer is, doable. I'll give you two quick examples. One, if you look at the tsunami of about over 10 years ago,
Yeah.
Earth Sciences put in a tsunami early warning system across our seas so that we will have definite warning. If there's a tsunami in Indonesia, we'll have a 6-minute warning to clear our coasts. The warning system is there in our coast. Tsunami training has been given to all our coastal areas. Everyone is ready, and they practice that every time. Similarly for earthquake warning. Therefore, it is feasible. Now, this pandemic warning is different because each disease is different. Yet, there are simple measures which can be taken no matter what the disease is. South Korea learned from the SARS coronavirus 1 and the MERS epidemics, and they have a system by which when there's a hint of an epidemic, then masks, social distancing, hygiene kicks in at high level. And everyone has to follow that. And they have a testing and tracking mechanism. We now have the Arogya Setu app, which allows testing, tracking, and isolation that has privacy and security completely protected. But South Korea, every phone call which anyone makes is tracked.
Yeah, I suppose, yes.
Every credit card is tracked, and then people are isolated. So these kinds of measures, agnostic to which pandemic is there, is something which can be done. Other things are needed. Deep investment in ecological sciences, environmental sciences, and in public health. Cleaning up our environment is very important. Our big trash areas, sewage, all of that needs to be cleaned. So these are measures which will protect us for any pandemic.
So I suppose, Loy, I think the short answer is that once the doability gets established, I think the institutionalization will follow. I think that's probably the right way to go about it. And in fact, I would recall the old song, that Hindi song that we used to hear, and it goes something like कि दूरियां नजदीकियां बन गई अजब इत्तेफाक है. Now see the way we conduct these meetings itself. it has made that song, look like very true. Earlier, we would not have thought about it. So, so that's a important issue. I think, Professor Vijayanathan, I'll bring you back to that original issue that we had started with, where I had mentioned that how do we horizontally spread this cooperation. And I will just give an example that in the field of giving massive employment, Narega, and government has increased its budget to almost 1 lakh crore. There's a huge scope for bringing in technological inputs, increasing the productivity, doing things more differently. So is there any horizontal coordination that is being initiated from your office? I mean, I already know that you have a call for agri-technologies, but similar current programs of Narega or NRLM, are we looking for your office working as a bridge between the technology departments and the user departments like MORD or Ministry of Health or the Ministry of even Social Justice and Empowerment? The user departments could probably be able to utilize their money much better with the infusion of technology. So could you...
So the cabinet has formed an empowered technology group, which I chair as the principal scientific advisor. Its purpose is exactly this: to have integrated technology officers in each department and work with them to do all of what you said. And that's a big push which we're doing. Secondly, there are multiple missions. For example, that Har Nal Se Jal, the water mission, for example, both in terms of supply and demand, the waste to wealth efforts, you mentioned the Manrega and several other programs. Now, there are two aspects to those programs. One, which is a very important and a special aspect for those who are, very, very poor, and that is to essentially deliver resources in a manner which they can pull themselves up and go to the next level. And that should not be compromised. That's very, very important. But there's another level, in addition to that, in which there should be a mechanism by which technology is used and enabled so that it can be used by them to further go to the next level. So it's not sufficient to give quote-unquote employment, but employment must be coupled with training in a significant manner. To do that, it is very important our institutions, our IITs, for example, be connected to the local environment. My favorite statement about many of our best institutions, IIT Kanpur, where I am from, is an example, is that these are extraordinary places, but they're a short walk from India. IIT Kanpur has very little to do with Kalyanpur next door. Now, of course, one can exhort IIT Kanpur and say, you must understand Kalyanpur and its problems. But that needs to be an organic relationship and not something which is forced. Today, technology of various kinds, the miniaturization of technology, and the link of technology to economic growth allows institutions to open up their walls, interact with local societies, with farmers, with self-help groups, with rural areas, with women organizations. This requires institutions to convert a part of their hard drive, partition it for this interaction purpose. You can have your algebraic geometer, you can have your nanotechnologists. They don't necessarily have to do this. But there is a partitioned hard drive in clusters of institutions working together in every city, whose job is to have a setup which interacts with industry, which interacts with society, interacts with our environment. That is feasible, and that's what our office is trying to do in these city clusters and linking them to the rest of our area.
Oh, that's really very well put. And sorry, I think your responses bring back to mind a lot of old Hindi songs, and I now remember the one which says, "Ab lord chale, naina bichhaye, baheं pasare, tujhko pukare desh tera." So I think probably for IITs or Pan-IIT, this particular call, ki tujhko pukare desh tera, is something which we need to heed to. I think that is something which the next session will. Yeah.
If I may add one point to that, And
Yeah.
that's something incredible about this alumni group. 30 years ago or 40 years ago, IIT alumni were young people who wanted to succeed and make it big. And to exhort them to connect with people in society when they themselves had to liberate themselves was a challenge. Today, the pool of people is very large and the pool of successful people is very large. So even if a small fraction of these successful people, as is happening already, if they now move from worrying about themselves to worrying about the country, extraordinary transformations will happen. And the Pan-IIT group, the global IIT alumni, is doing just that. So there are different times for different things for different people. Everyone doesn't have to do the same thing all the time, but the organization should, have a major effect on the country and its economy and its society. That's eminently feasible. So that's, I think, wonderful to see.
Oh, that's very well put. I think, thank you for your endorsement. I think it's time for us to wind up our part of the conversation. I'll remind everybody of the famous Hindi writer Kamleshwar. And Kamleshwar used to say कि अहमियत इस बात की नहीं है कि आप कहाँ हैं. It's not so much material where you are. अहमियत इस बात की है कि आप जहाँ हैं वहाँ क्या कर रहे हैं. So I think this is a lesson which all of us have to take in our lives. And as far as Professor Vijay Raghavan is concerned, वो जहाँ हैं वहाँ वो बहुत कुछ कर रहे हैं, and everybody is seeing it. And I'm sure the Pan-IIT will also be, the Reach for India program will take inspiration from you. And certainly we will take this particular task forward. So I think we are now very close to our conversation. There's just one last question which is there. So with the permission of the organizers, I'll just mention this. It says COVID has given an opportunity to improve our basic health and education sector. What is GOI response to take this up? And this is Tarun Shukla has asked. Before I give it to Professor Vijay Raghavan, I may remind our audience also that health, nutrition and education, a certain amount of expenditure on it was made mandatory under CSR for public sector by government very recently. So government is alive to this fact that these three hang together. The improvement in both, when you say health, I take it that health and nutrition is together, and education. So that is something which will be an effort to which probably the institutes of higher learning may contribute in terms of bringing knowledge. I suppose, Professor Vijay Raghavan, that's the view which we all agree.
Absolutely. I would just add a couple of points to that. Increasing expenditure in these areas, of course, is very important. There are always multiple different kinds of pulls. But also the efficiency of the investment needs to be looked at, and we need to invest in
I'm afraid that investment question probably the net didn't like, so we lost.
So we must make the efficiency of our investment high, so that while we increase investment, we also have greater bang for the buck. I'd like to also, use this opportunity to say how much teams within my office are working with all arms of the government, with organizations such as the Pan-IIT Global Alumni, with other organizations, to make this a shared sense of purpose so that we are very effective in all that we do. And with the government, of course, including the state government.
Thank you, Professor Vijay Raghavan. It was wonderful talking to you. I also learned a few things, and I'm sure our audience would have benefited. We have questions, but unfortunately, I think there are constraints of time. I'm not a regular anchor, but I can also say abhi ek break ka time ho gaya. So thank you very much, and thank you Hari, for your initial anchoring. And Professor Vijay Raghavan.
Thank you all, and thank you, Hari. Yeah. Bye-bye.
One of the biggest challenges India faces is in the area of providing equal opportunities to all sections of society. Skill development is one initiative which brings equal opportunities to all.
Pan-IIT Alumni Reach for India Foundation, headquartered at IIT Bombay, partners with state governments through non-profit, joint venture enterprises to create an institutionalized skill development architecture exclusively for the underserved across all districts of the state. The first such special purpose vehicle or SPV was created with agencies of welfare of the government of Jharkhand. The Pan-IIT model of skill development is predicated on assured placement, 100% skill loan financing, best-in-class training and residential infrastructure led by ex-army personnel. The foundation runs Gurukuls with 2 to 3 month training in construction, logistics, manufacturing and Kaushal colleges imparting 1 to 2 years of trade licenses, vocational education in trades like nursing, catering exclusively for the underserved.
बहुत अच्छी ट्रेनिंग आपको मिल रही है। आप सौभाग्यशाली हैं कि आप देश के इस हुनरमंद काम को बढ़ाने वालों में सबसे अच्छी संस्थाएं हैं जो 3-4 उसमें से एक मैंने मैं अनुभव किया। भारत सरकार का मंत्री बोल रहा है तो कहीं कहीं बहुत अच्छा काम यहाँ होता है।
कॉन्फिडेंस हमको गुरुकुल दिया है सर के स्टूडेंट जो निकल के गए हैं वो अच्छी नौकरी भी कर रहे हैं और गुरुकुल के स्टूडेंट्स विदेश तक गए हैं।
आज अगर गुरुकुल में अगर नहीं होता, ना ही मैं दुबई को देख पाता, ना ही मैं 35 से 40 हजार में कमाता।
ये नर्सिंग कौशल कॉलेज है और मेरी फैमिली कंडीशन उतना अच्छा नहीं है कि इसमें लोन प्रोसेस के द्वारा पढ़ाई कराई जाती है जिसमें कि घर से पैसे नहीं लगते हैं। कॉलेज बहुत अच्छा है क्योंकि इसमें फैसिलिटी ज़्यादा है और यहाँ थ्योरी क्लास के साथ साथ प्रैक्टिस पर ज़्यादा ध्यान दिया जाता है कि इसमें हाई टेक्नोलॉजी के द्वारा पढ़ाया जाता है। जैसे कि सिमुलेटर है, यहाँ वार्ड बनाए गए जैसे प्रैक्टिस वार्ड है, ICU वार्ड है।
And now, ladies and gentlemen, for the IIT Alumni Foundation Roundtable, the moderator is Ashant Desai, founder and former chairman of 2 top 20 publicly listed software companies, Mastech and not just so. He's on the governing board of IIT Bombay, IIM Ahmedabad, and over 10 other educational institutes and NGOs involved in education, skills, and entrepreneurship.
Good evening to all of you here who have come here to attend Converging Samaj Sarkar Bazaar Pan-IIT event, E-Conclave. As you might already have attended our inaugural session and you know the general theme, but I just want to repeat for those who might have joined just now. We are all going through unprecedented times. We know what it is about. I don't have to explain it. We, as an IIT alumni, need to do something for the nation because nation has given us all this education. We have to come together to see how we can meet this unprecedented challenge as alumni. And idea of this was to bring together three arms of our nation: Samaj, that is society; Sarkar, that is government; and Bazaar, which is market or corporate, together to see how we can solve this problem. And CNBC TV 18 has been kind enough to support this whole initiative. So here we are through CNBC 18 to have this event here. We will be discussing all the issues coming out of COVID, of course, but we would like to take even a larger view of the future of India and how these three pillars, these three dimensions of our society, that is Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar, can come together to solve the problems of COVID, post-COVID, and more importantly, events much later beyond, to build the future of India. So to do this, we have three very important guests with me. One is from Samaj, as I call him, Hari Padmanabhan. I'll introduce all of them in detail. Give me some time. We have from Sarkar, Ms. Himani, and from Bazaar and Corporate, we have Dr. Joshi. We are all together next 1 hour to discuss these issues together, and I'll be the moderator. Let me start first with my friend, and as he calls himself, parallel entrepreneur, Hari Padmanabhan. Hari Padmanabhan is a parallel entrepreneur. He is also a mentor and co-founder and chairman of PARFI, the PARFI Pan-IIT Reach for India, which is driving this event. And this was sent in 2009 with other IITians. I was lucky to be part of that group which looked at it. He is, of course, industry veteran with 40 years of journey, and presently he is quite active in a venture capital space, and he is executive chairman of Encore Group, a venture operating in partnership, and he is a partnership and mentor of Indus OS, which is a mobile application startup. He is a IIT Kanpur guy, and I am Calcutta alum. Hari, welcome to you here. I would like to start with you because PARFI, or Pan-IIT Reach for India, is an example of what Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar can come together and create wonders. The story is amazing. I am aware of the story, of course, having lived it along with you. However, I think it's up to you to explain this amazing story, how it came about and what it is doing now. Over to you, Hari.
Sure. Thank you, Ashank. And, Ashank, we've been working shoulder to shoulder in this. And for everybody's information, Ashank is co-chair of PanIIT Alumni, and we started this whole initiative together. The seed or the inspiration for this whole conceptualization of Pan-IIT Alumni Reach for India came from the 2006 conclave of the Pan-IIT Alumni, in which we had the then president, Dr. Kalam, as the key speaker. He very clearly, in this quintessential Kalam way, gave us alumni a very interesting message, a very, very pointed message. He asked us, what have we really done for the country? We've done very well in all our areas, whatever areas of work, business, industry, commerce we have worked in, academia, research, whatever. But what have we actually delivered for the country? And he ended by saying IITians should be providers of jobs, not seekers of jobs. That got us thinking. Long story short, we very soon came, and thanks to Kalyan Chakravarti, who is not here with us today, but hopefully he'll be here with us in a future panel or a future session. He and we all three of us worked together, and he put together this whole model where we can bring in various stakeholders in a collaborative environment. And the idea was to, we wrote down 10 assumptions at that point about how we go about it and all the rest of it. It's a different story that we had to just tear that up after 6 months of getting started, because none of we had to find the realities and actually going into the field and engaging with the field. It's typical startup, pivoting and going forward. But after the phase was over, in sometime in 2010-11, we landed in Jharkhand. And that changed the entire scenario and put us on the path to where we are today. And I think this is important. As a basic model, we had clearly said that we should start with the end objective. We should start with jobs, not training and skilling for the sake of skilling, but skilling from the perspective of providing the underprivileged youth long-term employment, sustainable long-term employment. And that required us to first tie up with corporates, with business, with industry, the Bazaar part, and get assured jobs on the table. We started with that. And then we conceived of a program that would be a fully residential program, extending the idea that if anybody who successfully got through a JEE could get into an IIT, why not the underprivileged youth of our country get the same opportunity by being able to, by just their aptitude, getting onto a platform that will give them not only the skills, but a job where the skill can be actually monetized. And so the program we put together was a loan-funded, job assured model, where someone whose economic situation would be such that she or he would not be able to access this type of a unique program, that doesn't come as a barrier. He gets started with a loan. So that was the program. And that's where the government and other institutions came in. This requires significant infrastructure. The government and in Jharkhand, they took the initiative, was giving us, opening up the infrastructure. First it had happened to be in Tamil Nadu, but Jharkhand is what gave us the structure. And the Jharkhand, putting together the entire program in Jharkhand, gave us one simple message that we need to institutionalize it on day one. So it was put together in a public-private partnership model where we created a joint venture called Praja, Pan-IIT Reach for Jharkhand. And in that entity, we have the government of Jharkhand as an equity partner and multiple aspects of the government, different ministries that actually of the government that really are engaged in this process of uplifting the Vikas Association of Society. And them being there gave us a platform which was sustainable over a long period of time. We have today about 29 Gurukuls, as we call them, which provide short-term 3-month programs with assured jobs in a variety of sectors: manufacturing, telecom, textiles, construction in a big way. Construction is the largest sector we address, logistics, textiles. So a variety of sectors. And that's one slew of the one segment of the work we do. Based on more of a pull from the government of Jharkhand, we also set up 2-year residential training programs called Kaushal colleges, where we started to focus on women. We have a 2-year A&M nursing training program, extremely successful, and Dr. Joshi is on the panel, and he's our #1 customer and the largest customer today for the offtake of those trained nurses. And we also have programs for culinary skills and women in manufacturing. So the two-tier set of programs have been set up. All of them are loan-funded, job-assured models, where a person knows at the time of joining what is the paycheck she or he will take home in the first month after the training is over. And in most cases will know which organization they would work with when they actually finish the program. So this is where it really came together. And this has been supported by other national institutions. NSDC gave us the initial fillip with significant amount of capital funding, and both in terms of loan and equity. And NABARD has been the ongoing backbone of this by funding our loans through their microfinance institution. So it is truly a Samaj, Sarkar, Bazaar model, with us being able to impact the weakest section of society, bringing together the governmental aspect as well as the Bazaar aspect, or the industry and business, to come together in this model. Today we have a number of, I think I'll leave it there and go forward and we can talk further. And
Thanks, Hari. I think it's an amazing story. I'm aware of many awards it has won, including this NSDC's most promising company for skill building, and many other kudos from many people all around the world, including, I think, National Geographic did cover the story as an example. But let's move on. Here we have our another important guest, Dr. Himani Pandey. Himani Pandey, she is an IAS officer working in Jharkhand. She has done her master's in public management and governance from London School of Economics and Political Science. She has served as deputy commissioner in various districts in Jharkhand, then Department of Industry, but subsequently she moved in Department of Welfare, where we really came in touch with her. And there her focus has been education for tribal children, livelihood, sustainable development to address joblessness, and improve economic activity to address the identity, income, and insecurity, 3I as we call it. So the Praja is a joint venture of Government of Jharkhand and the PARFI, Pan-IIT Reach for India, about which Hari just talked. And she was instrumental in making it successful, and her support has been great, as I know. Beyond this, of course, she has done a lot of work targeting hardcore poor people, to graduate single women-headed household of extreme poverty, to involve in terms of doing a lot of work. She is, of course, currently posted after a very successful Department of Welfare career into the Department of Finance and Planning. I think I'll ask Himani. My question to you, Dr. Himani, is you have worked with Praja, and you have seen this whole model of what I would say Sarkar and Samaj, or a non-profit, working together to make substantial impact, as we heard from Hari. But how this whole journey happened? You have been a witness to it, you have been supporter to it. I would like to hear a story from your side of it.
Yeah, thanks, Ashank. I just wanted to add one point to what Hari said, that this is a public-private partnership. I think the most important segment is that it's a public-private, not-for-profit partnership. And that's where the mission alignment as well as the incentive alignment of the government and PARFI took place. Because we had a government orientation, we had an impact orientation, and we had a market orientation, which were all aligned and, in tandem. And I think that's why it's been a very long partnership. It's been a fruitful partnership, and it's not something which happened very rapidly. I mean, I think the first interaction which we had with Pan-IIT was in individual capacities as deputy commissioners. The first Gurukul was set up in 2011. And then subsequently in 2012, and as Hari mentioned, Dr. Kalam, when he visited Jamshedpur, he did ask about what the industry and the government were collaborating in terms of skilling, because Jamshedpur is the major industrialized town of Jharkhand. So I think that was one of the things which got us thinking, and then we started working. But what we realized subsequently, that if we really wanted to scale it up, it cannot happen with individual initiatives of various officers. It had to have a formal space. And that's when a Section 8 company was made in 2014. And this was, as Hari has mentioned, it had a 49% stake of Government of Jharkhand and 51% of PARFI. And I think this is where the journey really took off from there. That we were able to establish a very formal space for dialogue, so that we could design, implement, and scale. I think that was very important for us, that we scale this whole thing, as well as how Hari mentioned, that it's not that one or two places where we are working. We wanted to take it to a much larger scale, not only the state of Jharkhand, across pan-India. And so this is what Praja has given. We have a very meaningful collaboration for sustainability. So it has ensured a continued dialogue with industry. And I would say it's been successful in the sense, some of the factors, if you could look at it, would be that the roles were extremely sharply defined. What the role of the government was, what the role was of PARFI was. So government was looking at making available space and infrastructure. And as I was saying earlier also, that space not only in terms of making buildings available or capex available for the initial startup, but also taking a very hands-off approach. So there was a literal space also which the government was giving through Praja. And apart from that, the government was also helping in ensuring that collaboration and the outreach to the Panchayat Raj institutions took place on a very regular basis. PARFI was doing its job of establishing functional linkages with industry, with academia, as well as with the community. So I think what changed for the government of Jharkhand was that we all have, in various departments, there's a lot of budget for training programs. So I think the whole program, as Hari said, it stops at just the training. So we give the training, we utilize the budget, and that's it. I think people do not think beyond that. What Praja fundamentally does is that it converts the skilling program into a demand-driven program. And I think that is something which is one of the driving factors of its longevity. And the second is that it's a 100% loan-based program. So this was a leap of faith for any government. You all know that trainings have been highly subsidized, almost 100 to the extent of 100%. And here we were saying that, it would be a loan-based program. The loan is the amount of loan which is taken is very low. The rate of interest is very low, but still it was a loan-based program. And I think that leap of faith has got justified. If we look at this almost 10 years of journey together with Pan-IIT, our loan recovery stands at a very healthy 82%, which is giving us, wings to actually make this program much more larger. And as Hari said, that we have 26 Gurukuls now, adding 3 more this year. We have 6 nursing Kaushal colleges. We have 3 ITIs, Kaushal ITIs coming up. So I think that's why there was a very good space for government and PARFI to really collaborate and work on a common vision.
So how much is the coverage of Praja today? How many districts, how many numbers?
We cover 21 districts. We cover 21 districts out of 24. And that's 26 Gurukuls. So Ranchi has a couple of Gurukuls. And then we are adding 3 more this year. So that will saturate. So we'll have at least 1 Gurukul across each district now. And apart from the 6 nursing Kaushal colleges which are functional, we are adding 2 more this year in Jamtada and Latehar. And 3 ITIs, Kaushal ITIs. So one more part was that you mentioned that, this was a organization. This is an SPV. Praja is an SPV of Department of Welfare. But other departments were also very plugged in to Praja. So we got the first autonomous ITIs in this sector in Jharkhand with Praja. So the Ranchi, the culinary ITI and the manufacturing ITI, which Hari talked about. These were the first autonomous ITIs which gave a lot of flexibility to the operator to design the course as per the market requirements. So I think that's what Praja does, is that the strengths of the industry are got on, and we benchmark the training to industry standards, to work site productivity, as well as the kind of training which is given and the skilling which is given is very relevant not only to the current requirements of the industry, but also prepares them for the future requirements of the industry. So I think this is how we want to progress and expand it even further.
Great to hear this story. This I always say to people whenever I get a chance to speak, that private non-government organizations bring some strengths of efficiency and processes, and government brings scale, reach at the ground level, and the intelligence at the ground level. And this is a good story which maybe whole nation should replicate at one level, I feel. But let me get in now.
If I can just make one comment. Himani mentioned what the role of the government was in detail. But what I want to really mention is the spirit with which they approached this whole thing. Honestly, prior to really getting into an equity type arrangement with them, and having them on the board, we had our usual apprehensions. The government is coming in. How much space will we have? Will they kind of, it is ultimately they can control practically every aspect. How much space will we have to really go about things in our own way? And it was really phenomenally eye-opening. Because when you say government, people see red, and I say red, I mean red tape, right? And it just didn't exist in the entire process. Quite the contrary, Himani herself used to review the progress of what is happening with her team, and then pull us up and say, "Hey, you said this would happen, 2 weeks ago. What's the status?" And the chief secretary was also reviewing it time to time. So the kind of what we were thoroughly, pleasantly but unexpectedly surprised about, if I can put it that way, was the kind of rigor, discipline, and commitment with which they went about getting this off the ground. And whenever we had an issue, we could always walk in, we could say what we wanted, and it was really taken up extremely urgently, seriously, and acted upon. And this is also a message I want to give to anybody else who's looking at it. Please relook at how you think about government and how they really approach. If you have a well-governed, institutionalized fashion in which to address any solution systemically, I think the government has got the wherewithals, the requirement and the need to really give you all aspects of support, infrastructure or whatever is required. That's really what I want to add.
Great, Hari. Actually, maybe someday there is some case study taught in
we should do that.
business schools, etc. Now, let me this story would not be complete, honestly, and successful without that third arm, that is Bazaar. It is only successful because Bazaar thought it made a difference to them. And Bazaar here means our customer, it is corporate sector, the people who, companies who absorb this training. So here we have Dr. Mahesh Joshi, CEO of Apollo Home Healthcare. Dr. Joshi is a business leader, innovator, and currently he is leading Apollo Home Healthcare as the CEO. He is a pioneer in emergency medicine specialist in the country and executive co-chairman of Society for Emergency Medicine. He brings, of course, clinical and administrative excellence, both. He is a physician and has gained acknowledgement nationally and internationally in emergency medicine. Now, Dr. Joshi, of course, has done his MBBS from Medical College of Amravati, and then he is a fellow of Royal College of Emergency Medicine in UK. And he is that well-rounded person. Having done all this, he has also done his executive MBA from ISB in Hyderabad. On to you, Dr. Joshi. My question to you is, as I said, you are the third arm. And what are your reflections of working with this experiment, if I may call it, the innovation, if I may call it, and how has it worked for you, of course, as a company, but as a corporate, what would be your comments?
So first of all, thank you, Ashank and Hari, for inviting me to be a part of this IIT Alumni Foundation Roundtable. I can without doubt tell to all the IIT alumni that each one of you should extremely proud of what Praja and Kaushal colleges are doing. Because this is exactly what was my feeling when I went to each of these Kaushal colleges and I visited each of your facilities there, whether it was nursing, whether it was the culinary, whether it was the ITI, or whether it was the 3D printing thing. And it was such an eye-opener for me. I came back with a lot of inspiration after the site visit. So coming to the Bazaar aspect of the nursing domain that we are talking about. So you know that there is a perennial short supply of nursing cadre in India, just to address the need on the hospital domain side. And here we are talking about a completely new vertical, which is home healthcare, which is not still an accepted mainstream or institutionalized mechanism of delivery in healthcare in India. But our chairman, as visionary as he is, he's very clear that this is the next big thing. And I think COVID has made us realize this, that there's a huge gap in community healthcare system in our country. So when we started this, obviously our biggest challenge was how do we get the appropriate manpower for this, because your BSc nurses, half of them are going abroad, right? And GNM nurses, if at all they are good, then they would be absorbed by medium level hospital, BSc by corporate hospitals, and by choice nobody wants to come to home healthcare. If at all they came because their salary was a little better than that. And we used to struggle to get nurses. And obviously on the nursing college side, if you look at, there are complete two different sectors of colleges that exist in India. One is some institutions which have been running courses in other domains for many, many years have started nursing colleges. Obviously, they have the experience and expertise to create courses, etc., and churn out nurses just like any other course. On the other side, there are smaller, very unorganized players who have also started nursing colleges, and their aim is to churn out numbers. We look at home healthcare, the patient is giving you the trust of entering into their homes and actually access to the bedroom also if there is a need to address the healthcare issue. And in such a domain, you need professionals who have knowledge, skills, but more than that, they need to have an attitude. And I think this is where most of the times the healthcare training institutes have failed on focusing on the attitude aspect. What impressed me was the entire value system that exists with the RFE, right from the leadership, the second level, on the ground leaders who are handling these colleges, the people who are recruiting, people who are monitoring. And most of the time when we used to engage with nursing colleges, the interaction would be per candidate, how much would we get paid to if you are going to be deploying them. This discussion never came up with Parfi and all the people who were there. All the discussion that came up was, what can we do to make these nurses better? What is the skill that you feel we must add to make them more employable, right? And then after they were put on to on-job training, and once they completed their training, they actually appointed a coordinator in each of the cities where these nurses are there to ensure that they are safe in those cities, that their needs beyond us as the employer are also being handled, and they coordinate with us even to this day. I mean, this kind of value for your own people that you have trained, your own students or your own alums, I think if you value them so much, obviously a customer like me will have great regard and respect for you people, for your people. And then when you go out in the market, the patients and their families also start treating them with respect and dignity. And it is such a gratifying thought to see these girls from interiors of Jharkhand who probably would not have spoken a sentence of English, would not have stepped into any of the metropolitan cities in their life. Today they are working in some of the top cities and also interacting with some of the most HNI families and also some of the lower middle income and absolutely normal families where somebody is suffering and their cost of healthcare has come down because they are able to take care of that healthcare need at home. So big kudos to all of you for setting up exemplary institutions like this.
Thanks, Dr. Joshi, for your kind words. I think will be a great inspiration to many of those who have made PARFI what it is today. There are more than 100 people working in PARFI, as I know. Let me quickly move now, given we have a time pressures. I have a lot of ground to cover, and time is running fast. Let me start again in a reverse order now. Dr. Joshi, COVID is an important part, and we started with it. What this Pan-IIT as a group can do, and how the Raja-PARFI combination is contributing towards it. Could you give a little bit a flavor of COVID and this nursing today, and what it means, and what kind of thing we could do, etc.?
So if you look at our biggest challenge today, if we just reflect on COVID, right? We should have prevented 70% of the people who have mild symptoms or they are asymptomatic from reaching to hospital. And this would have been possible if we had an established home health care system within the country. And the existing infrastructure could have been completely used for moderate or severe affected COVID. So I think COVID is changed the paradigm, is going to change the paradigm of healthcare delivery. There is going to be a massive shift from institution or hospital-based healthcare right to the home, with the comfort and convenience of the people and at a fraction of a cost. And just to share with all of you, pre-COVID, none of the health insurance companies were ready to reimburse home care. But in the last 2 weeks, there are 3 insurance companies who have agreed first for the COVID cover and have also agreed to cover the non-COVID related healthcare expenses. So I think this is a big news for the country. Home healthcare segment is going to grow significantly. And I think in the follow through of COVID, if I look at, there are 3 or 4 important areas that will need newer skills of people coming in. One would be, COVID testing. That's an important area. COVID rehabilitation, because quite a few of these people who would have their lungs affected will be going back home. They will need lung rehab. They will need oxygen support. They might need BiPAP care at home. And we can't afford these people to be occupying the hospital beds in long run. And this is going to be a long shot. So I think the other important domain from an Indian perspective is the growing elderly population and the nuclear families. So more and more elderly are going to be needing care at home, right from the medical needs to the needs of companionship, which is one of the important dimensions which we are not focusing, but in the coming years, this is going to haunt this country in a big manner, because I think this loneliness, depression is mentally killing a significant proportion of our elderly people. So I think these are 3, 4 important areas which will come up as newer opportunities for skilling in the healthcare domain.
Thanks. I think the nursing part is really playing important part in this COVID scenario. I'm happy to note that PARFI got into this Raja and started this work with nursing. So let me go to Dr. Himani. COVID, of course, opened up a lot of other challenges. Migrant labor, and I was really moved when I used to see on TV people moving. My heart broke. So what are your experiences? What is about Raja? What about Jharkhand government, migrant labor? Could you put these pieces together in a COVID perspective?
Yeah. I think when you talked about this migrant crisis which was happening, I think now that it's taken place, we need to look at all the data that has got generated. I think for the first time, almost every state government has collected data of the kind of migrant laborers that were employed in their industries, which states they belong to, which districts they belong to, what is the kind of training they've had previously or not had at all. And I think this kind of data which is available with us is so granular that we can really use it. An organization like Praja can really use that data for reskilling people. Even for basic skilling is not there. People have migrated without any skills. So they're doing jobs in various places which provide a limited economic opportunity to them. But they're not really, able to move up the value chain. So I think Praja can help them reskill, help them upskill, so that Praja provides this kind of stewardship that moves from a limited economic opportunity to provide them a social protection as well as a economic security to those people. So I think that's where Praja steps in. The other thing, to continue with what Dr. Joshi was saying, I think Praja has already stepped in Jharkhand, and we are opening up 3 COVID diagnostic labs. And the first one is likely to get inaugurated within a couple of days. And where the strength of Praja has, in terms of organizing and talking to the industry and collaborating with the industry, has helped the Department of Health establish these labs in a record time, and that will help us to increase the number of tests as well as do the pooling of the tests also.
Oh, very nice to hear this collaboration again at the COVID. Maybe Hari can throw some more light on this. Hari?
On the migrant
you are
labor,
on the mute.
Am I okay now?
Yeah, you are audible.
Yeah, so I was saying that, you brought two aspects. One is migrant labor, the other is nursing. On the migrant labor side, we've been dealing with migrant labor from day one, in the sense that we have probably made migration a more formal, more dependable process for those who find opportunities outside, don't have sufficient opportunities in their own states and want to go out and look for better opportunities, by providing the structured framework where they can get the skills that are required from the marketplace, like demand-led, as Himani pointed out earlier. That's the first step. The second step is what Himani mentioned, where these people are back in their home states, and when they go back, will they go back to the kind of work they've been doing so far, which is not something that is as dependable, or they already know, they have seen the downsides of casual labor, they have seen the downsides of a job that is not a long-term employment contract with the employer. And from there is definitely a desire to go to something which is a lot more sustainable from their economic and social standpoint. And that is where I think the infrastructure we have created in Jharkhand, and that we look to create in other states as we go forward, can be a massive fillip to the entire process. One, of training them in specific areas to put them back in a lot more stronger fashion. And the second, potentially also to look at areas where investments in those states can become more meaningful, because now there's trained labor available, and there is various other initiatives that different governments are taking in terms of creating the environment for local investment. So this is the other aspect that would come in. As far as nursing is concerned, I think what Dr. Joshi mentioned, if I can add one element to that, he mentioned how these nurses are, the soft side of the training. I think the most important element of how we look at training is not just providing the specific skill related to the area in which they would work, but give them life skills which will last them a lifetime. So the discipline that we bring about, I need to mention that all are both the short-term programs, which we call Gurukuls, and the Kaushal colleges, the 1 or 2 year longer-term programs. The principal and the trainers are all ex-armed forces personnel. They naturally bring about a certain discipline in how they go about putting the entire process in place. And they demand that they teach discipline from day one. And you're talking about people who have come from many of them from tribal areas, and absolutely no inbuilt kind of a way of getting up at a particular time in the morning, doing a specific thing, and getting on to work at a particular time. That discipline is just not there. So that's demanded. If you go to our Gurukuls, you will find a flag hoisting in the morning. There is yoga. There is physical training. Then post the training sessions, during the morning sessions, there is English speaking. There is even the videos or the movies. They are curated to give them a sense of national belonging and patriotism in a very, very real sense. So all this is kind of put together in a very holistic fashion. And I always look at the way the dari and the bed in which they sleep, how it is rolled and kept in one straight line every morning before they go to work. Exactly how it will be in an army camp. And that's the kind of discipline in every element they bring about. And they provide all the services in the institution. We only have one qualified cook, 3 principal and trainer combination, 1+2 or 1+3. And everything else, whether it is cleanliness, hygiene, putting things in place, everything is done by the people. So it is pure seva. I mean, that's part of the entire process. They have to learn to keep their environment clean and put what's required to keep the environment positive and livable at a very different standard. That's important as well.
Great. I think
I just want to.
the skill alone is not enough.
I think Dr. Joshi has a question.
I think Dr. Joshi also would agree with me. It is the soft training that goes with it. The full person comes on the job, and thinking about that is great. I think I want to rush to my. Sorry.
I just want to make a point that,
that
training is reflected in what is called as reliability and responsibility in home health care. And the biggest thing is, when a nurse is taking care of a patient, unless the other person comes, you are not supposed to leave the patient's house. And there have been times when these nurses have waited for 2 to 3 hours, and they have been responsible. They have not left the patient alone. And this is one of the most important feedback that we are getting from our clients, that these nurses are extremely dedicated and reliable. And close to that kind of training for this.
That's what very nice to hear. The whole person comes to the job, not only his skill or her skill. I mean, let me quickly move again. Let's have a few quick comments of this experiment, what it means in future. I think India has to transform. Our Prime Minister wants that 5 trillion economy, but with that economy comes a lot of other challenges of society, of skills, of healthcare. I think this Samaj, Sarkar, Bazaar combination is this Praja Parfi is a good example, but I think we need to move beyond it. So I would like to quickly ask questions. Maybe I'll start with Dr. Himani. What are your thoughts on the future of this whole thing? Maybe quick few points, and then we'll move on with
I
others.
think the direction in which we are moving in Jharkhand is actually to try and move towards establishing a Kaushal Vidya Academy. So which would look at right now we have in the Gurukul, as Hari was pointing out, dropouts, essentially dropouts who are coming in. So in a Kaushal Vidya Academy, what we would like is to introduce a vocational program right from class 11 onwards. So the Kaushal Vidya Academy would have students of class 11 and 12, so that when the student passes out of class 12, that person is actually fully equipped even for a job. Not everyone wants to study after class 12, and I think that's what we are looking at, that we introduce a far more skilled manpower into in nation building compared to what we are doing today. I think that's the direction that we want to move forward in.
Excellent. Dr. Joshi, do you have any thoughts on?
Ashank, I think there are 1 or 2 people waiting for questions, Ikra and Fulmani. Why don't we take
will do that. I will do that. I think we have time still, so maybe I'll finish with you and then go to questions. If you can quickly talk.
So I can only say that we need credible, reliable, committed, professional organizations to come up and to scale up things. And I think what you guys have demonstrated is a great example which can be done in partnership with the government. And if such partnerships are created in a transparent manner, I see no reason why the corporates or the other sector will not employ. In fact, they'll be more than happy to partner to take this forward. And I'm looking forward for a long haul and long journey together in this partnership to take this mission forward.
Yeah. So I think we have a lot of questions to all of you. I don't know whether I can do justice, but there are people waiting on our video here. Can organizers get them online and they can ask questions?
Sir, good evening. Is I am audible? Hello.
Yeah, you are audible.
So good evening. I am Ikra Zabi, and I am A&M trainee nurse working in Apollo Home Healthcare in New Delhi. Sir, I would like to ask a question to panel that how can we train ourselves to frontline community healthcare workforce for fighting against COVID-19?
Yeah, maybe anyone can answer the questions. Any one of you.
Well, we really don't have a specific program focused on this particular aspect you're talking about. But our generic program, what we've seen, prepares the nurses for a broad level of engagements. And number of our nurses during this period in Jharkhand, even in those are in the second year, have been pulled into the kind of work that you're talking about. And that has really been a very big positive for them to be able to handle the pandemic in the state with a lot more alacrity and urgency. So in a fashion, there is a preparation, but it's too early to talk about a very specific COVID-related training program. Probably we should rush and do that very quickly, and this is something we will take back.
Anyone else want to add something, or we'll move to the next question?
Go on.
Yeah, please. हाँ, बताइए क्या क्वेश्चन है आपका?
Good evening, everyone. I am Fulmani Kumari. I am ANM training in Apollo Home Health Care in Kolkata. My question is, COVID-19 का सिचुएशन में जॉब अपॉर्चुनिटी क्या है फ्यूचर में ANM नर्स के लिए?
And reply to this question?
Why don't you take that up? You have a better feel than any one of us here.
तो ऐसा है कि आप जो फिलहाल काम कर रहे हैं वो अपने आप में एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट जिम्मेदारी है कोविड के समय, क्योंकि कोविड के आ जाने से नॉन कोविड बीमारियां जाने नहीं वाली। इनफैक्ट उन लोगों को आपकी बहुत ज्यादा जरूरत है अभी, क्योंकि अस्पताल पूरी तरह से काम नहीं कर रहे हैं, डॉक्टर्स अवेलेबल नहीं है, टेस्ट करवाना मुश्किल हो रहा है, मेडिसिन पहुंचना मुश्किल हो रहा है। तो आप जो फिलहाल काम कर रहे हैं वो कोई काम कम नहीं है। दूसरी बात, एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट जिम्मेदारी आपकी, जो पेशेंट्स आपके हैं, जहां पर आप हैं, जिनके साथ हैं, उनको कोविड से बचाना इटसेल्फ, इसके लिए आपको ट्रेनिंग दिया गया है कि कैसे पर्सनल प्रोटेक्टिव इक्विपमेंट यूज करना है, कैसे इन्फेक्शन रिड्यूस करना है। तो ये अपने आप में एक तरह से इनडायरेक्टली आप कोविड की तरफ ही काम कर रहे हैं। कोविड स्पेसिफिक में बहुत सारी अपॉर्चुनिटीज रहती, जैसे मैंने पहले बताया आपको कि एक तो है कि आप एक कोविड रिहैब नर्स बन सकते हैं, स्पेशलिस्ट। अगर आप कुछ और ज्यादा अच्छा ट्रेनिंग करते हैं, हाउ टू यूज बाईपैप, हाउ टू यूज ऑक्सीजन कॉन्सेंट्रेटर डिवाइसेस एक्सेट्रा, तो आप कोविड स्पेशलिस्ट नर्स बन सकती हैं फॉर पोस्ट कोविड डिस्चार्ज पेशेंट्स को रिहैबिलिटेशन करने के लिए। तो बहुत सारी नई अपॉर्चुनिटीज आएंगी इसमें। अभी तो ये और बढ़ने वाला है, और जैसे चीज और हमारे सामने क्लियर होती जाएगी और नई अपॉर्चुनिटीज आती जाएगी। तो इम्पोर्टेंट ये है कि जो आप कर रहे हैं ये भी बहुत बहुत मायने रखता है, और इसका कहीं ना कहीं इंडायरेक्ट हाथ है कोविड के स्प्रेड को कम करने में।
Ashok,
yes,
Ashok, there's a question on replicating the Praja model in other states.
Yes, please. Yeah.
So this is something that, and the question is there a trade-off? And the question is from Ravish Vasan. He says, what would be the trade-off for any state government to replicate the Praja model? There's really no trade-off. I think what has been established in Jharkhand very well is that if there is a strong intent from the government to look at this as a partnership, and if we institutionalize the SPV on day one, incorporating the elements required to make it sustainable in the long term, and provide the framework on day one, including how the board is structured and what is done. This is what we have experienced so far. I do not think there is any trade-off. On the other hand, I think there is a major amount of synergy in terms of this working to meet their objectives to provide long-term sustainable employment to their own, the citizens of the state. So it's a win-win-win. When I say win-win-win, the government wins, we win, the individual wins. As well as I can add another win with the Bazaar side, or the customer wins, as well as Dr. Joshi was saying. So there's absolutely no trade-off. It's a completely 4-win situation.
Okay. Any other questions, or we can move to summarize this?
To just add to what Ravish has asked, I think one point where, I agree with what Hari is saying. There's really no trade-off. I think Praja has provided a very strong template for replication, and that's the strength of the whole program organization. What it helps in terms of specific to government is that it also ensures a far more better targeting of skilling budgets, and probably reducing the envelope size, because you have too much of money present for this for scaling across various departments, which I think we can curtail and make a far more targeted intervention. And to add what Hari was saying, 70% of the trainees that we've trained so far under Praja are scheduled tribe youth. So I think that's a very important parameter, that we've really reached out to the very vulnerable and the very marginalized. And this, apart from this, we've also targeted the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, people who've never even stepped out of their districts, let alone step out of the state. So I think it's a win-win. I agree with what Hari is saying.
Okay, great. I think time is running out. Let me, I am not going to attempt to summarize this whole interesting discussion, but I started, as I said, that if we have to succeed, if there is one thing we need to do well in our country, is to break the silos, to come together to solve the problems of the country. And that is what is about Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar. If we can come together, we can do miracles. We can change this nation much faster and move forward and achieve our vision much faster than even what others can think we can do. And let whole world watch us. And it's great to have Pan-IITians here talking about it. That gives me still more pleasure as an IITian, but I think it can be done by anyone in this country. So this is an example of Sarkar, that is Jharkhand government, Samaj or society or societal organization, a non-profit organization like Praja, Parfi, and corporates, that is Bazaar, like Apollo Hospital and many others who are working with Praja and Parfi, to come together and show the world that we can make a difference and make a difference fast. I think we are long ahead this Pan-IIT E-Conclave. This is the first day. We are going to have day tomorrow. And again, we are going to talk about many of the aspects of this whole transformation that we need, the contribution we need to make as an IITians, and how we can work together as Sarkar, Samaj, and Bazaar over next 2 more weeks beyond this week. So I thank all of you here who have come to attend this, and beyond anything else, thank all of the participants here, starting of course with Dr. Yamani, Dr. Joshi, and Hari, to spend time with us on this platform, and CNBC, of course, to make it all happen. I think I'll stop here and wish you a good night to all of you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.